My daughter held up a worst father alive sign when I came home from the hospital. So I drained her college fund. I'd been working construction for 15 years, taking every overtime shift and weekend job to give my daughter Haley everything she wanted. Private school, dance lessons, new iPhone every year, shopping trips with her friends. My wife Lisa always said I spoiled her too much, but I couldn't help it. She was my only kid, and I wanted her to have everything I didn't growing up. I'd leave the house at 5 in the morning and get back at 8 at night covered in drywall dust and exhausted, but seeing Haley happy made it worth it. She'd run to the door when she was little, screaming daddy and jumping into my arms. Now at 16, she barely looked up from her phone when I walked in. Lisa said it was just teenage years. I kept telling myself that too. 3 weeks ago, I fell off scaffolding at a job site, 20 feet straight down onto concrete, broke 4 ribs, fractured my shoulder, and got a concussion that had me seeing double for days. The foreman called Lisa from the ambulance and she rushed to the hospital with Haley. While I was getting x-rays, Lisa told me Haley was really worried and crying in the waiting room. That made me feel better even through the pain. I spent 5 days in the hospital, and Haley visited once for 10 minutes and complained the whole time about the smell and how gross hospitals were. Lisa apologized for her, saying Haley was just stressed about me being hurt. When I finally got released, I was excited to go home. The doctor said I needed 2 weeks of rest minimum before even thinking about work. Lisa drove me home carefully, avoiding every pothole. She said Haley had made something special for my homecoming. I figured maybe she'd cooked dinner or decorated the house. When we pulled up, I saw Haley standing in the driveway with her friends Becca and Jill. She was holding a big poster board above her head. In huge black letters it said, "Worst father alive," with an arrow pointing down at her. Her friends were laughing and recording on their phones. Lisa gasped and started yelling at Haley to put it down. Haley rolled her eyes and said it was just a joke for social media, that everyone was doing this trend where you pretend to hate your parents. She said I was being sensitive and couldn't take a joke. I stood there with my arm in a sling, ribs wrapped, head still pounding, staring at my daughter who thought my pain was content for her friends. Lisa grabbed the sign and tore it up while Haley screamed about her ruining the video. Haley called me dramatic and said if I was a cool dad, I would have played along. Her friends agreed, saying their dads would have thought it was funny. That night, Haley complained about dinner because Lisa made soup instead of ordering pizza. She said I was ruining her weekend by being home because now she couldn't have people over. When I reminded her I was recovering from almost dying, she said I was exaggerating and that plenty of people fall at work. The next day, while Lisa was at the grocery store, Haley had more friends over. They were loud, and I asked them to keep it down because my head was killing me. Haley told them I was being a baby about a little fall. One of her friends said, "At least I had a job," and Haley said, "Yeah, an embarrassing one where I got dirty and sweaty like some kind of animal." She said she tells people I work in an office so they don't know her dad is just a construction worker. I heard her tell them about how she was counting down until college so she could finally get away from her loser family. She said the only good thing about me was the money I made for her college fund, which was sitting at $40,000 after years of saving. Her friend asked if she felt bad talking like that when I was hurt. Haley said I probably fell on purpose for attention and workers' comp. That's when I made a decision. The next morning, I called my nephew Tommy, who was 20, and working 2 jobs to pay for community college. Smart kid, grateful for everything, always offering to help when he visited. I told him I wanted to talk about his education. He came over that afternoon, and I told him about the college fund I'd been saving. I said I wanted to pay for him to finish his degree in engineering. He cried and said he couldn't accept it. I insisted, and we went to the bank that day to transfer everything. When Haley found out a week later, she lost her mind. She screamed that I'd stolen her future. I reminded her about the sign, about calling me an embarrassment, about saying I was the worst father alive. I told her worst fathers don't save for college funds. She said it was just a stupid joke. I said so was thinking she'd get my money after treating me like garbage. Lisa backed me up completely. Then last night, she came out of her room with a suitcase saying, "I am leaving and you won't be able to stop me." I stood in the doorway watching Haley grip her suitcase handle. I told her calmly that she was 16 and not going anywhere tonight. Lisa backed me up immediately, moving to stand beside me and saying we needed to talk about this as a family instead of Haley running away from consequences. Haley dropped the suitcase and screamed that we were both horrible parents who ruined her life. Her face turned red and she was shaking with anger. I felt my ribs ache from the tension in my body, but I didn't move from blocking the door. Lisa suggested we all sit down in the living room to talk this through. Haley refused and stormed past us to her room, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the pictures on the wall. I heard something crash inside her room, probably something she threw. I sank onto the couch with my ribs aching from all the tension. Lisa sat beside me and took my hand in hers. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, just breathing. Lisa said we were not backing down on the college fund decision. I agreed completely. She squeezed my hand and said we needed to figure out how to move forward as a family, though. I knew she was right. but I had no idea how to do that when Haley was acting like this. We talked quietly about maybe getting family therapy or setting some clear rules. Lisa kept rubbing my back because she could tell my shoulder was hurting from the stress. That night, I barely slept because my shoulder was throbbing. I kept replaying Haley holding that sign while I was injured and in pain. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laughing with her friends while I stood there with my arm in a sling. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. I got ice from the freezer and pressed it against my ribs. Lisa found me sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down across from me. Then she reminded me that I made the right choice. She said Haley needed to learn respect before she left for college anywhere. I asked if she thought Haley would ever forgive me. Lisa said eventually yes, but that forgiveness had to come with understanding what she did wrong. We stayed up talking until almost 4 in the morning. The next morning, Haley came out of her room around 10. She tried to act like nothing happened. She walked into the kitchen where Lisa was making coffee and asked if Lisa could drive her to meet friends at the mall. Lisa set down her coffee mug and told Haley no. She said Haley was grounded until we could have a real conversation about her behavior in the college fund. Haley's mouth dropped open. She accused us of being controlling. She said all her friends' parents let them go out and we were being unfair. Lisa stayed calm and said Haley could be mad about it, but the answer was still no. Haley grabbed her phone and stormed back to her room. I heard her on the phone immediately, probably calling friends to complain about us. I spent the morning at a follow-up doctor's appointment. The waiting room was cold and smelled like cleaning supplies. My doctor checked my shoulder and ribs carefully. He pressed on different spots and asked about my pain levels. He cleared me to return to light duty work in 2 weeks. On the drive home, I thought about how I fell 20 feet, and Haley made it about her social media content. The whole thing felt so wrong. My doctor had noticed I seemed distracted during the exam. He asked if I was dealing with stress at home. I admitted my family situation was complicated right now. He told me stress could slow my physical recovery and to try to take care of my mental health too. When I got home, I found Lisa on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was getting louder and I could tell she was upset. I heard her sister's voice coming through the phone, loud enough that I could make out some words. Lisa was defending our decision about the college fund. Her sister was saying we were being too harsh on Haley. After Lisa hung up, she looked exhausted. She told me that Haley had called 3 relatives this morning trying to get someone on her side. Haley had apparently painted us as cruel parents who stole her future. Lisa said her sister, her mom, and her aunt had all called within an hour. I felt angry that Haley was trying to turn our family against us. Lisa said most of them calmed down once she explained what really happened with the sign. That afternoon, someone knocked on our door. I opened it to find Kent, Valerie's dad. He said he wanted to talk about our family situation. I invited him in even though I had a bad feeling about it. He stood in our living room and started lecturing me. He said teenagers make mistakes and I was overreacting to a harmless prank. He kept saying boys will be boys, except it was girls will be girls. I let him talk for a minute. Then I pulled out my phone and showed him photos of my injuries from the hospital. The bruising on my ribs was purple and black. My shoulder was swollen. I asked if he would think it was harmless if someone mocked him while he was hurt like this. Kent looked at the photos and his face changed a little, but he didn't apologize. He just said Haley was still young and we should give her another chance. I told him we were giving her chances, just not her college money. He left without saying goodbye. Lisa and I decided we needed to set clear expectations for Haley moving forward. We sat down at the kitchen table with paper and pens. We wrote down rules together. The list included a genuine apology to me, no social media for a month, regular family therapy sessions, and helping with household chores. We agreed that if Haley wanted any financial support for college, she would need to earn it back through changed behavior over the next 2 years. Lisa added that Haley needed to maintain good grades and show consistent respect. I wrote down that she had to get a part-time job to start saving her own money. We both signed the paper like a contract. It felt official and serious. We called Haley down for a family meeting that evening. She came downstairs slowly, her arms crossed. We sat in the living room with Haley in the chair across from us. Lisa handed her the paper with our rules. Haley read through it and then she laughed. She said we could not actually enforce any of this. She said she would just go live with her friend Valerie. Lisa calmly pulled out her phone. She showed Haley a text message from Valerie's mom. The message said Haley was not welcome to stay there after Kent told her what really happened with the sign. Haley grabbed the phone and read the message herself. Her face went pale. She scrolled through and saw similar messages from 2 other friends' parents. Haley's face fell apart when she realized none of her friends' parents would take her in. She started crying real tears for the first time since this whole thing started. These were not angry tears or manipulation tears. These were the tears of someone who just understood they were alone. She said we had turned everyone against her and ruined her reputation. Her voice was shaking and she could barely get the words out. I told her that she ruined her own reputation by being cruel to someone who was injured. I said these were the natural consequences of her choices. Lisa moved to sit beside Haley, but Haley pulled away. She kept crying and saying it was not fair. I felt bad seeing her so upset. but I also knew this was necessary. She needed to understand that actions have real results that you cannot just escape from. Over the next few days, Haley stayed in her room except for school and bathroom trips. She took her meals upstairs on paper plates and left them by her door for Lisa to collect. I heard her moving around at night, pacing back and forth across the creaky floorboards. Lisa kept checking on her, but Haley barely responded beyond one-word answers. Lisa started worrying out loud that we were pushing Haley away for good, that she would never forgive us. I reminded Lisa that we were not punishing Haley for being a normal teenager. We were holding her responsible for real cruelty towards someone who was hurt and in pain. Lisa nodded, but I could see the worry lines getting deeper around her eyes. On Thursday afternoon, my phone rang while I was icing my shoulder. It was Stuart from the construction crew. He asked how my recovery was going and if I needed anything. Then he mentioned he heard through the neighborhood about what happened with Haley and the college fund. I felt my face get hot because I did not want everyone knowing our business. But Stuart said he wanted me to know the guys at work were on my side. He said his own daughter went through a phase where she treated him like dirt, and he wished he had stood up to her the way I did. His support made me feel less alone in this mess. The next morning, Tommy called while I was making coffee. He sounded excited and told me he registered for spring semester classes. His engineering program advisor looked at his transcript and was really impressed with his grades. Tommy went on about which classes he was taking and how the advisor said he had a bright future. Then his voice got quieter, and he asked if things were any better with Haley. I told him honestly that it was still hard and tense at home. Haley was not speaking to us much, and everyone was walking on eggshells. Tommy said he felt bad about causing problems in our family. I stopped him right there and said he should not feel guilty at all. I told him he earned this chance through his own hard work and being grateful for what people did for him. The money went to someone who deserved it, and that was the whole point. Tommy thanked me again and said he would make me proud. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about how different Tommy and Haley were, even though they were only 4 years apart in age. That afternoon, Lisa got a call from the school counselor. She put it on speaker so I could hear. The counselor said several of Haley's teachers noticed she seemed really distracted and upset in classes. She was not turning in homework and just stared out the window during lessons. The counselor wanted to meet with us to talk about what was going on. Lisa and I agreed to come in the next day. We sat in the counselor's small office with motivational posters on the walls. The counselor was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a calm voice. She asked what was happening at home that might be affecting Haley. Lisa and I looked at each other, and then I explained the whole situation. I told her about my fall, the hospital stay, the sign Haley held up, the things she said about me and my decision about the college fund. I tried to be fair and not make Haley sound worse than she was. The counselor listened without interrupting and took notes. When I finished, she said she understood why we made that choice. She suggested we consider family therapy to work through this as a group. She also offered to check in with Haley every week to make sure she was handling the stress okay. We thanked her and agreed that therapy was probably a good idea. 2 weeks after the suitcase incident, my doctor cleared me to go back to work on light duty. I could not climb scaffolding yet, but I could do equipment checks and inventory. My first day back, I showed up at the site and the guys all greeted me. A few asked how I was healing and if I needed help with anything. Nobody brought up the Haley situation directly, but I could tell from the way they looked at me that they knew something big happened. Stuart put me on inventory duty, counting tools and checking safety equipment. It felt good to be doing something useful again instead of sitting at home thinking about family drama. My shoulder started aching around 2 in the afternoon, but I pushed through until quitting time. Being back at work made me feel normal again, like I was still the same person I was before the fall. That evening, Lisa went upstairs to check on Haley. I heard Lisa knock and then the door open. I stayed downstairs, but I could hear their voices through the ceiling. After about 20 minutes, Lisa came back down with red eyes. She said Haley was crying in her room and actually let Lisa sit with her. Haley admitted she did not think I would really take away the college money. She thought parents always forgave their kids no matter what they did. Lisa told Haley that forgiveness does not mean erasing the results of your actions. Real love sometimes means letting people face what they caused. Haley listened and cried more, but she did not argue. Lisa said it felt like the first real conversation they had in weeks. I felt a tiny bit of hope hearing that, even though I knew we still had a long way to go. The next day, I called a therapist named Denise Muller, who a friend recommended. She worked with parents and teenagers who were having major fights. I explained our situation over the phone, and she had an opening the following week. When the appointment day came, we all drove to her office in separate silence. Haley sat as far from me as possible in the waiting room, staring at a magazine without turning the pages. When Denise called us in, she had us sit in a circle of chairs. She was probably in her 50s with gray hair and a calm way of speaking. She explained that today we would each share our version of what happened without anyone interrupting. She said everyone would get their turn to talk. Denise looked at me first and I told my side. I talked about working all those years, getting hurt, coming home to that sign, hearing what Haley said about me. Lisa went next and backed up everything I said. Then it was Haley's turn. Haley's version shocked me because she genuinely did not understand how mean the sign was. She explained that her friends did pranks like this on their parents all the time for social media. Everyone filmed their parents getting mad and then laughed about it later. She said it was just supposed to be funny content, and she did not think it was a big deal. Denise let her finish, and then asked Haley a question. She asked how Haley would feel if someone made fun of her while she was injured and hurting. Haley went quiet. She stared at her hands for a long time. Finally, she said in a small voice that she never thought about it that way. She never connected her dad being in real pain with her holding up that sign. Denise nodded and said that was something important for Haley to think about before our next session. On the drive home, nobody talked. But when we pulled into the driveway, Haley asked if she could talk to me alone. Lisa went inside and Haley and I stood by the car. She told me she was starting to get why I was so hurt by what she did, but she was still mad about the college fund. I told her that was okay. She could be angry and still need to take responsibility. Those two things could both be true at the same time. Haley nodded slowly and then went inside without saying anything else. That weekend, Saturday morning came, and I was in the kitchen making toast. Lisa was getting eggs out of the fridge. Then Haley came downstairs in her pajamas. She walked over to the stove and asked Lisa if she needed help with breakfast. Lisa looked surprised but handed Haley a spatula. They cooked together while I sat at the table watching. Haley did not apologize or bring up anything that happened, but the way she stood next to her mom, flipping pancakes and talking about normal stuff, felt different, less angry. Lisa caught my eye across the kitchen and gave me a small smile. It was a tiny thing, but it felt like maybe we were moving in the right direction. Sunday afternoon, Lisa invited Tommy over for dinner. She said it was time for everyone to get used to the new situation. Tommy showed up with flowers for Lisa and shook my hand. We sat down at the table and the meal was stiff and awkward. Haley barely looked at Tommy the whole time. She pushed food around her plate and gave short answers when anyone asked her questions. After dinner, Tommy thanked me again for changing his life. He mentioned he got a part-time job at the campus library to cover his living costs and books. He wanted to make sure he was not taking more than he needed. Haley stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loud against the floor. She mumbled something about homework and left the table. A few minutes later, we heard her crying in her room. Tommy looked guilty and asked if he should leave. I told him no, this was not his fault, and Haley needed to work through her feelings. But inside, I felt torn between being proud of Tommy and sad for my daughter. After Tommy left that night, Lisa went upstairs to check on Haley. I stayed in the kitchen cleaning up dinner plates and listening to the muffled sounds of their voices through the ceiling. 20 minutes passed before Lisa came back down. She sat across from me at the table and folded her hands together. She told me Haley spent the whole conversation crying about feeling replaced. Haley said Tommy got everything she was supposed to have, and now I loved him more than her. Lisa explained that Haley kept saying Tommy wasn't even my real son, just a nephew, so why did he deserve her money? I asked Lisa if Haley understood why I made the choice. Lisa nodded slowly and said Haley was starting to get it, but the fear of losing my love was bigger than anything else right now. I sat there thinking about how I'd spent 16 years trying to make Haley happy, and somehow she ended up scared I didn't love her. Lisa reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She reminded me that teenagers don't always make sense, and that Haley's fear didn't excuse what she did, but it explained some of the anger. I went to bed that night thinking about the little girl who used to run to the door when I came home. Our second therapy session happened on a Thursday afternoon. Denise had us sit in the same chairs as last time. She pulled out 3 pieces of paper and 3 pens. She explained we were each going to write down what we needed from the others to move forward as a family. I stared at the blank paper for a minute before writing. I wrote that I needed real respect, not fake politeness. I needed Haley to understand how much the sign hurt me when I was already in pain. I needed her to see me as a person, not just a wallet. Lisa wrote quickly, filling half her page. When Denise asked her to share, Lisa said she needed both of us to stop putting her in the middle of every fight. She was tired of being the messenger and the peacemaker. She needed us to talk to each other directly, instead of through her. Haley's turn came and she read from her paper in a quiet voice. She said she needed to know I still loved her even though I gave away her college money. She needed proof that I wasn't replacing her with Tommy. She needed to feel like part of the family again instead of the bad guy everyone was mad at. Denise asked each of us to respond to what we heard. I looked at Haley and told her I never stopped loving her for 1 second. Lisa told her she would always be our daughter no matter what happened. Haley wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I took a breath and told Haley something I'd been thinking about for days. I said I loved her completely, and that's exactly why I made this decision about the money. If I had let her treat me that way and still given her everything she wanted, I would have been failing as her father. Real love means teaching respect, not just handing out rewards. Haley started crying harder than I'd seen since she was little. Her whole body shook and she couldn't catch her breath. Denise passed her the tissue box. When Haley finally calmed down enough to talk, she said she did understand the sign was cruel. She said she'd been thinking about it every day since it happened. She wasn't ready to say sorry yet, but she knew what she did was really bad. It wasn't a full apology, but it was the first time she actually admitted she was wrong. Denise told us that was real progress. On the drive home, nobody said much. But when we pulled into the driveway, Haley didn't run straight to her room like usual. She sat in the car for an extra minute before getting out. My physical therapist examined my shoulder and ribs the following week. She had me lift my arms, twist my torso, and do some strength tests. Everything checked out better than expected. She cleared me to return to full duty at work. I could climb scaffolding again, lift heavy materials, do everything I did before the fall. The physical recovery felt like a real win, but I knew the emotional stuff with Haley would take way longer to heal than broken bones. When I got back to the job site the next day, Stuart pulled me aside during lunch break. He said he was proud of how I was handling everything with my family. He mentioned that a lot of guys would have either given in right away or cut their kid off completely. I was doing the hard middle path of holding firm on consequences while still keeping the door open. I thanked him and got back to work. Being up on the scaffolding again felt good. My body remembered all the movements even after weeks away. 3 weeks after Haley threatened to leave with her suitcase, she knocked on our bedroom door after dinner. Lisa and I were watching TV. Haley asked if she could talk to both of us together. We followed her downstairs to the living room. She had a piece of notebook paper in her hand, folded up small. She sat on the couch across from us and unfolded it. Her hands shook as she started reading. She apologized for making the sign. She apologized for calling me embarrassing. She apologized for lying to her friends about my job. She apologized for saying I fell on purpose. Her voice got quieter with each sentence. When she finished reading, she was crying so hard she could barely breathe. The paper fell from her hands onto the floor. Lisa moved to sit next to her. I stayed frozen in my chair for a second, just watching my daughter fall apart. This was what I'd been waiting for. Real understanding of what she'd done. I got up and walked over to the couch. I sat on Haley's other side and put my arm around her shoulders. She turned and grabbed onto me, burying her face in my shirt. She kept saying sorry over and over between sobs. Lisa wrapped her arms around both of us. We sat there as a family, all 3 of us crying. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Eventually, Haley pulled back and wiped her face. She asked what happens now with the college fund. I told her the truth. The money was staying with Tommy because that decision was final. But if she kept working on her behavior, kept being respectful, we could talk about ways she might earn some financial support for college. It wouldn't be $40,000, but we wouldn't leave her with nothing if she showed us real change over time. Haley nodded and said that was fair. She looked exhausted from crying. Lisa and I spent the weekend creating a detailed plan. We wrote down exactly what Haley needed to do to earn back some college support from us. She had to maintain respectful behavior at home. She had to keep her grades up. She had to get a part-time job and start saving her own money. She had to keep going to therapy. We decided we'd match whatever she saved from working over the next 2 years. So if she saved $5,000, we'd give her $5,000. It wouldn't be the full amount she lost, but it would help. We sat Haley down Sunday night and showed her the plan. She read through it carefully. Then she looked up and said she felt better having a clear path forward. She said not knowing if she'd ever get any help was scarier than knowing she had to work for it. She asked when she could start looking for a job. Lisa offered to help her search online that week. Haley applied to 3 different places and got hired at a coffee shop near our house. She started working weekends and 2 afternoons after school. Lisa drove her to the first few shifts. When Haley came home after her first Saturday, she collapsed on the couch. She told us her feet hurt and her back ached from standing for 4 hours straight. But she also talked about the other workers and the regular customers she met. She seemed tired but not miserable. The second week, she brought home her first paycheck. She showed us how she was splitting it up between her savings account, gas money for when Lisa drove her, and a little bit for herself. Having her own money changed something in how she talked about things. She mentioned how long it took to earn even a small amount. At our next therapy session, Haley told Denise all about her new job. She described how hard it was to be on her feet for 4 hours, taking orders and making drinks and cleaning up messes. Denise listened, and then asked her a question. She asked Haley to think about her dad's construction work and connect it to her coffee shop experience. Haley went quiet. Then she said she never really thought about how hard my job was every single day. She worked 4 hours and felt destroyed. I worked 10 or 12 hours doing way harder physical labor. For the first time, I saw real understanding on her face. Not just guilt about what she said, but actual awareness of what my life was like. Denise smiled and said that kind of understanding was important. After the session ended, Haley walked next to me to the car instead of ahead like she used to. A month after his first visit, Kent showed up at our door again. I answered, and he stood there looking uncomfortable. He said he needed to apologize for lecturing me about parenting. Valerie had told him more details about what Haley actually said about me, not just the sign. He realized the disrespect went way deeper than he understood before. He said if his daughter talked about him that way, he'd have done the same thing I did. I accepted his apology and invited him in for coffee. We sat at the kitchen table and I told him Haley was making real progress. She had a job now, was doing better in the school, and actually seemed to understand why I was so hurt. Kent looked relieved. He said Valerie felt terrible about recording that video. I told him teenagers make mistakes and Valerie was still welcome at our house. We talked for another 20 minutes about how hard it was to raise kids these days. When he left, he shook my hand and said he respected how I handled everything. A few days later, Haley knocked on my bedroom door while I was getting ready for work. She asked if we could invite Tommy over for dinner sometime soon because she wanted to apologize to him properly. Lisa overheard from the hallway and said that sounded like a good idea. We settled on Friday night, and I texted Tommy to invite him. He replied right away saying he'd love to come. When Friday arrived, Haley helped Lisa cook dinner instead of hiding in her room like she used to. She set the table without being asked and even put out the nice plates we usually saved for holidays. Tommy showed up at 6 with a bottle of soda and a smile on his face. We all sat down together, and the first few minutes were awkward with everyone passing dishes and not saying much. Then Haley cleared her throat and looked at Tommy across the table. She told him she was sorry for being rude when he first came over and for making everything so uncomfortable. She said she was glad the money was helping him and that she understood now why I made the choice I did. Tommy set down his fork and told her he appreciated that, and he knew this was a hard situation for everyone. He said he didn't want to cause problems in our family, and he was grateful for the opportunity. Haley asked him about engineering school, and his whole face lit up as he described his classes and professors. He talked about thermodynamics and calculus and design projects, and Haley actually seemed interested instead of jealous. She asked how he managed working and going to the school at the same time. Tommy explained his schedule at the campus library and how he studied between shifts. The conversation flowed easier after that, with all of us talking about college and what different programs were like. After dinner, Haley and Tommy did the dishes together while Lisa and I sat in the living room. We could hear them laughing about something in the kitchen, and Lisa squeezed my hand. The next week, I was doing dishes after breakfast when my shoulder seized up hard. I dropped the plate I was washing back into the sink and grabbed my shoulder with my other hand. The pain shot down my arm and into my back. Haley walked into the kitchen and saw me standing there with my jaw clenched. She asked what was wrong, and I told her my shoulder was acting up again. Without saying anything else, she gently moved me aside and took over the dishes. I tried to protest, but she waved me off and told me to go sit down. I went to the couch and tried to stretch my shoulder, but the pain wouldn't ease up. That evening after dinner, Haley came into the living room with a bag of ice wrapped in a towel. She handed it to me and told me to put it on my shoulder for 20 minutes. I thanked her, and she just nodded and went back to her homework at the kitchen table. These small things she was doing, taking over tasks when I was hurting and thinking about my comfort, meant more than any big apology speech. They showed she was actually paying attention to how I was doing instead of just thinking about herself. Lisa's phone rang the next afternoon while we were watching TV. She looked at the screen and told me it was her sister calling back. She answered and walked into the bedroom for privacy. I could hear her voice through the door but couldn't make out the words. When she came back 20 minutes later, she looked surprised in a good way. She told me her sister apologized for judging how we handled things with Haley without knowing all the details. Apparently her own teenage son had been acting entitled and disrespectful lately, and watching what we went through made her rethink her approach with him. Lisa said they had a real conversation about how hard it is to raise teenagers these days and how easy it is to make excuses for bad behavior. Her sister admitted she'd been doing that with her son, and it wasn't helping him. Lisa seemed relieved to have her sister's support instead of criticism. 2 days later, the school counselor called and asked if we could come in for a meeting. My stomach dropped because I thought Haley was in trouble again. But when we sat down in her office, the counselor smiled and told us Haley's grades had improved across all her classes. Her teachers reported she seemed more focused and engaged instead of distracted by her phone. The counselor said Haley had been talking to her about college plans and seemed genuinely interested in her future. She mentioned that Haley had started researching schools with good financial aid programs and scholarships. Lisa and I looked at each other, both of us surprised and proud. The counselor said she'd never seen such a turnaround in a student before, and whatever we were doing at home was clearly working. On the drive back, Lisa said she couldn't believe this was the same girl who held up that sign 2 months ago. 4 weeks into her coffee shop job, Haley came home on a Saturday afternoon and asked if we could talk about money. She sat down at the kitchen table with her paycheck and a notebook where she'd written everything out. She showed us how she was splitting her earnings between her savings account for college, gas money to pay Lisa back for driving her to work, and a small amount for personal spending. She'd saved $200 so far toward college. I knew it was tiny compared to the $40,000 that used to be in her fund, but watching her carefully divide up her paycheck and explain her budget made me proud. She talked about how long it took to earn even a small amount and how she understood now why I worked so much overtime. I told her I was proud of her for taking responsibility and working hard. She smiled and said she was proud of herself too. At our next therapy session, Denise asked us each to talk about what we'd learned from this whole crisis. Lisa went first and said she learned to stop making excuses for bad behavior, even when it's her own daughter. She said she used to think protecting Haley from consequences was part of being a good mom, but now she understood that real love means letting your kids face the results of their choices. I said I learned that love sometimes means disappointing your kids for their own good, and that giving Haley everything she wanted actually hurt her instead of helping her. Haley took a deep breath and said she learned that actions have real consequences and that she took her family for granted. She said she thought her parents would always forgive her no matter what she did, and she never considered how her words and actions affected other people. Denise nodded and said those were important lessons for all of us. She asked Haley how it felt to be working and saving money now. Haley said it was hard, but also good because she felt like she was building something instead of just waiting for things to be handed to her. That evening at home, Haley asked if she could see the photos from my accident and hospital stay. She said she needed to really understand what she mocked with that sign. I pulled up the pictures on my phone, the ones Lisa took in the hospital. There were photos of my injuries, the x-rays showing my broken ribs and fractured shoulder, pictures of me in the hospital bed with tubes and monitors. Haley looked at each one carefully, zooming in and studying them. Her face got paler as she scrolled through. When she finished, she handed my phone back and said she felt sick thinking about holding that sign while I looked like this. She said seeing the actual damage made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I believed her remorse was genuine now because I could see it in how she couldn't meet my eyes and how her hands were shaking. The following week, my construction crew threw a small celebration for my full recovery and returned to regular work. Stuart organized it during our lunch break, bringing in sandwiches and a cake. I invited Lisa and Haley to stop by the site, and they showed up around noon. Haley had never been to one of my job sites before. She looked around at the scaffolding and equipment and the half-built structure we were working on. Stuart came over and introduced himself to Haley. He told her I was one of the hardest workers he'd ever supervised and that the whole crew respected me. He said I never complained and always volunteered for the tough jobs. I saw something change in Haley's face as Stuart talked. Instead of the embarrassment she used to feel about my job, I saw pride. She asked Stuart questions about what we were building and how long projects usually took. My coworkers were friendly and welcoming, and Haley seemed to relax around them. On the drive home, she said she understood now why I was always so tired and sore. That night, Haley came downstairs and told us she'd deleted all her social media accounts. Lisa and I looked at each other, surprised because we hadn't asked her to do that. Haley explained she was tired of performing for people online and trying to get likes and views. She said the whole sign incident started because she wanted to do a trending video, and she was done chasing that kind of attention. She wanted to focus on real relationships with actual people, instead of followers who didn't really know her. Lisa asked if she was sure, and Haley nodded. She said social media made her feel like she had to be mean or dramatic to get noticed, and she didn't want to be that person anymore. A few days later, Tommy called my phone in the evening. He sounded excited and told me he made the dean's list his first semester. He also received a small scholarship for academic achievement that would help cover books next semester. I congratulated him and said I was proud of how hard he was working. When I told Haley the news, I expected her to feel jealous or upset. Instead, she smiled and said that was great for him. She said she was going to work hard to earn scholarships too when she got to college. The rivalry and anger that used to be there seemed to be changing into something healthier, like she saw Tommy's success as motivation instead of a threat. 5 weeks had passed since the whole mess started, and that Tuesday night we sat down for dinner together like a normal family. Haley set the table without being asked while Lisa pulled a roast chicken from the oven and I made a salad at the counter. We filled our plates and started eating, and Haley launched into this story about a customer at the coffee shop who ordered the most complicated drink she'd ever heard. She described all the modifications and substitutions, making hand gestures and doing different voices, and Lisa and I were laughing so hard I had to put down my fork. Lisa shared gossip about our neighbor 3 houses down, who apparently got caught having an affair with someone from his gym, and we all shook our heads at the drama. I told them about the new shopping center we were building on the east side of town, how the foundation work was tricky because of underground water issues. Haley asked actual questions about the project, wanting to know how we solved the water problem and when the building would be finished. The conversation flowed naturally from topic to topic, nobody checking phones or rushing to leave the table. We were finding our way back to being a family, even though we were all different now from who we'd been 2 months ago. Thursday afternoon, we had our therapy appointment with Denise, and she greeted us in the waiting room with a warm smile. We settled into our usual spots on her couch, Haley in the middle this time instead of pressed against the armrest. Denise looked over her notes and said she was really impressed with how far we'd come in just 5 weeks of weekly sessions. She suggested we could move to monthly appointments instead, since we'd built such strong communication tools. Denise reminded us that healing wasn't going to be a straight line, that we'd have setbacks and hard days, but we knew how to talk through problems now. Haley surprised both Lisa and me by asking if we could keep the monthly sessions because she found it helpful having a neutral space to discuss things. Denise smiled and said that was exactly the kind of insight that showed real growth. The following Saturday, I took Haley to visit the community college about 20 minutes from our house. We parked in the visitor lot and walked around campus, checking out the different buildings and reading the signs. Haley had researched their business program online and wanted to see the classrooms and meet with an advisor. The advisor was a friendly woman who showed us the facilities and explained how their 2-year program worked. Haley's eyes lit up when the advisor mentioned partnerships with 4-year universities for easy transfers after getting an associate degree. We picked up brochures and course catalogs, and Haley asked smart questions about financial aid options and class sizes. On the drive home, she was quiet for a while, looking through the papers we'd collected. Then she turned to me and said thanks for not giving up on her even when she was being awful. I reached over and squeezed her hand, telling her I never stopped believing she could turn things around. That evening, Lisa and I went out for our wedding anniversary dinner at a nice Italian place downtown. We got dressed up and left Haley at home with instructions to order pizza and not have anyone over. Sitting across from Lisa at a candlelit table, I realized we were talking about regular things for the first time in weeks. We discussed vacation ideas for next summer, whether we should repaint the living room and how Lisa's job was going. Then we acknowledged how much stronger our marriage felt after facing this crisis together as a united front. Lisa said she was grateful I'd stood firm on the consequences, even though it was hard, because it was absolutely the right thing for Haley. I agreed that we'd made the tough choice, and watching Haley change proved it was worth the pain. Tuesday afternoon, Haley came home from the school and dropped her backpack on the kitchen table with a thud. She pulled out a report card and handed it to me without saying anything, but I could see she was trying not to smile. All A's and B's stared back at me, her best grades in 2 years, according to Lisa, who looked over my shoulder. Haley explained she'd been staying after school for extra help in math and actually doing her homework at night instead of scrolling through her phone. I told her I was really proud of her effort and improvement. She said she was trying to prove to herself that she could earn things instead of just expecting them to be handed to her. Lisa hugged her tight and suggested we celebrate with ice cream after dinner. A few days later, Lisa noticed Haley smiling at her phone during breakfast, which used to mean she was on social media, but now meant something different. Lisa asked what was making her so happy, and Haley showed us a text conversation with Tommy. They'd been messaging occasionally, and she was asking him for advice about college applications and studying techniques. Tommy was being patient with all her questions and really encouraging about her progress. Lisa caught my eye across the table and said quietly that maybe something good came from this painful situation after all. Watching Haley and Tommy build a relationship felt like proof that people could grow past hurt and find connection. 6 weeks after the suitcase incident, Haley came downstairs on Sunday morning and asked if we could take a family photo together. She said she wanted to replace the memory of that horrible sign with something positive. We went out to the backyard where the light was good, and Lisa set up her phone on a tripod. We took several pictures, trying different poses and locations around the yard. In every photo, all 3 of us were genuinely smiling, no forced expressions or fake happiness. Haley looked through the pictures on Lisa's phone and picked her favorite, then went to the drugstore to get it printed. That evening, I saw her taping the photo to her bedroom wall. Our next therapy appointment was a month after the previous one, and Denise asked if we felt ready to graduate from regular sessions. We talked about how we'd been handling conflicts at home, using the communication techniques she'd taught us. Lisa and I agreed we felt confident managing things on our own, knowing we could always come back if we needed help. Then Haley spoke up and said therapy taught her that apologizing meant changing behavior, not just saying sorry. She told Denise she was committed to continuing all the changes she'd made. Denise looked genuinely moved and said that level of self-awareness was rare in teenagers. Now that I was fully recovered from my injuries, I went back to taking overtime shifts at the construction site. But I made sure to keep weekends completely free for family time, no exceptions. Haley noticed the change one Saturday when I was home making pancakes instead of heading to a job site. She commented that she liked having me around more on weekends. I explained that almost dying made me rethink my priorities, and while I'd always work hard to provide for our family, I wouldn't sacrifice every single moment with them anymore. Finding balance mattered more than extra money in the bank. 3 months after starting her coffee shop job, Haley came home one evening with her savings account statement. She'd managed to save $1,000 by working consistently and being careful with her spending. Lisa and I sat down with her at the kitchen table and wrote a check to match her savings as we'd promised. Haley seemed more excited about this $2,000 she'd earned than she ever was about the original $40,000 we'd saved for her. She said she finally understood that money meant more when you worked for it yourself. We drove to the bank together and opened a college savings account in her name, and Haley held the deposit receipt like it was made of gold. The next week at work, Stuart pulled me aside during lunch break and asked if I had a minute to talk in his truck. We climbed into his F-150, and he turned to face me with a serious expression. He said the company was creating an assistant foreman position, and he wanted to offer it to me, explaining it meant better pay and less climbing since I'd be doing more planning and oversight. I accepted immediately and shook his hand, thanking him for the opportunity. When I got home that evening, I sat down with Lisa and Haley at the dinner table and told them about the promotion. I explained that part of the raise would go toward increasing what we could contribute to Haley's college matching fund. Haley's eyes filled with tears, and she got up and hugged me tight, saying she didn't deserve parents who still supported her after how she'd acted. I hugged her back and told her that's what parents do when their kids show real change. A few weeks later, Tommy called to say he was bringing his girlfriend home for Thanksgiving and asked if they could join us for dinner. Lisa immediately said yes and spent the whole week before preparing the house and planning the menu. When they arrived on Thursday afternoon, Tommy introduced us to his girlfriend, a sweet engineering student named Maya, who had an excited way of talking about their program. During dinner, Haley asked them tons of questions about college life, dorm experiences, classes, and what engineering school was really like. Maya answered everything enthusiastically, while Tommy smiled and added details. After we finished eating and started clearing plates, I noticed Haley and Tommy talking quietly in the living room. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught Haley telling him she was glad the money went to someone who appreciates it. Tommy thanked her and they hugged, which made Lisa grab my hand under the table. The next afternoon, Haley's friend Valerie showed up at our door looking nervous and asked if she could talk to Haley. I called Haley down and they went out to the front porch while I stayed inside. Through the window, I watched Valerie apologizing and gesturing a lot, clearly upset. Haley listened and then responded calmly. I heard Haley say they were still friends, but she was different now and wouldn't be doing mean pranks for social media anymore. Valerie nodded and hugged her before leaving. When Haley came back inside, she seemed proud of herself for setting that boundary. I told her I'd overheard part of it, and I was proud of how she handled the situation. As December approached, Lisa's phone started ringing with relatives who'd taken sides during the crisis wanting to reconnect. Lisa's sister offered to host a family gathering and promised everyone would be supportive instead of judgmental. We drove over on a Sunday afternoon, and I was nervous about facing extended family. But when we arrived, everyone was careful and kind. Haley handled questions about her plans with total grace, explaining she was working and saving for community college before transferring to a 4-year school. She talked about her coffee shop job and her savings account without any embarrassment. Several relatives told her they were impressed with her maturity. On the drive home, Lisa said she was amazed at how well Haley represented herself. That evening, I asked Haley to sit down with me and Lisa because I wanted to talk about the future. I explained that we would help with college costs, but she'd need to take some responsibility through work, loans, and scholarships. Haley listened carefully and then said she actually preferred it that way because she'd appreciate her education more. I stared at her for a long moment, amazed at how much she'd grown in just 2 months. This wasn't the entitled teenager who held that sign. A few days later, Haley asked if she could see the college fund statements showing the transfer to Tommy. She said she wanted to fully accept what happened. I got the folder from my desk and handed her the paperwork. She read through every page carefully, looking at the account balance, the transfer amount, and Tommy's name on the recipient line. When she finished, she looked up and said she understood why I made that choice. She added that she would have done the same thing if her kid treated her that way. Hearing her say that made something tight in my chest finally relax. 2 months after the suitcase incident, I came home from work to find 3 envelopes on the kitchen table with our names on them. Lisa opened hers first and started crying. I opened mine and found a handwritten letter from Haley. She thanked me for not giving up on her and then listed specific things she'd said and done, taking full responsibility for each one. She wrote about the sign, about calling me embarrassing, about lying about my job, and about saying I fell on purpose. She explained how she was working every day to become someone who deserved my sacrifices. Reading her words made tears run down my face because I could see my daughter becoming a genuinely good person. The following Saturday, Lisa suggested we volunteer together at a local charity that helps families in need. We spent the morning working at their food bank, sorting donations and helping families pick up food. Haley worked alongside a single mom with 3 kids who told us about working 2 jobs and still struggling to pay rent. Another family explained how the dad worked construction like me, but got hurt and lost his job. Haley listened to their stories and helped them carry boxes to their cars. On the drive home, she was quiet for a while before telling me she finally understood how lucky she'd been to have everything handed to her for so long. The next week at work, Stuart mentioned that several guys on the crew had been asking him about my situation because they were dealing with entitled teenagers too. He suggested I might want to talk to them. That Saturday, I met 3 coworkers at a coffee shop, and we spent 2 hours sharing what Lisa and I learned about setting boundaries while maintaining love. They asked specific questions about therapy, consequences, and how we stayed united as parents. It felt good knowing our family's struggle might help other families avoid similar pain. A few days later, my phone rang while I was making dinner, and Tommy's name showed on the screen. When I answered, he was so excited he could barely get the words out. He'd been awarded a major scholarship for his sophomore year that would cover most of his tuition. His voice cracked as he thanked me again for giving him the chance to prove himself. I told him he earned every bit of his success through his own hard work. I said watching him thrive had been one of the best parts of this whole difficult situation. When I hung up, Lisa asked what happened, and I told her about the scholarship. She smiled and said Tommy was making the most of his opportunity. Haley overheard from the living room and called out congratulations to Tommy. That night, lying in bed, I thought about how far we'd all come and how much further we still had to go. A few weeks later, Haley spread college application materials across the kitchen table and worked on them every night after her shift at the coffee shop. She printed out information from 3 community colleges and 2 four-year schools that offered strong financial aid packages. I watched her type her essays on her laptop, pausing to think and then typing again with focus I hadn't seen from her in years. She asked me one evening if I would read what she'd written, and I sat down beside her while she pulled up the document. The essay talked about learning accountability the hard way and understanding the real value of hard work. She wrote honestly about her mistakes and how working for her own college money taught her lessons she never learned when everything was handed to her. She described the moment she realized her parents weren't being cruel. They were saving her from becoming someone terrible. Reading her words made my throat tight because I could see genuine growth in every sentence, not just someone writing what colleges wanted to hear. I told her any school would be lucky to have a student who learned these lessons, and she smiled at me with real gratitude instead of the fake politeness she used to use. Over the next month, our family found a rhythm that felt completely different from before the crisis. Haley started doing dishes without being asked and picked up groceries on her way home from work. She talked to us with actual respect instead of the eye-rolling and sighs that used to fill every conversation. Her room stayed clean, and she made her own breakfast before school. She still had normal teenage moments where she got annoyed or wanted to sleep in, but the mean entitlement that used to poison everything was gone. Lisa and I talked about it one night after Haley went to bed, and we both agreed that as painful as everything was, it probably saved our family from something much worse down the road. If Haley had gone to college with that attitude, she would have failed out or become an adult nobody wanted to be around. On a regular Tuesday in early December, I came home from work covered in sawdust from cutting boards all day. I walked in expecting to find Lisa cooking dinner like usual, but instead, Haley was at the stove stirring something in a pot. She'd made my favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots, and set the table with actual napkins and everything arranged nicely. We sat down together, and Haley told us about a difficult customer at work who complained about everything, and then she asked me about my day, and actually listened when I described the deck we were building. She wanted to know details about the construction, and seemed genuinely interested instead of just being polite. These simple moments of normal family connection felt more valuable now than they ever did before, like we'd almost lost something precious and got it back just in time. That night I lay in bed with Lisa sleeping beside me and Haley safe in her room down the hall, and I thought about everything that happened in just 2 months. My ribs and shoulder had healed completely from the fall, but more importantly, my family had healed from wounds that went much deeper than broken bones. Haley was becoming someone I felt genuinely proud of, not just because she was my daughter, but because of the person she was choosing to be through her own effort. The $40,000 was gone, and Tommy was using it to build a good future, but we gained something worth more than any amount of money. We had a family built on real respect, honest communication, and love that included holding each other accountable when it mattered. I fell asleep feeling truly hopeful about our future together, knowing we'd all grown from this crisis in ways that would last.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.